Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am starting today a new chapter in the context of Java Enterprise Edition course. This chapter is named Java Server Pages, or also known as JSPs. This chapter contains 6 elements as the outline. I will divide this chapter in 2 parts to ease the presentation in short videos. So I will start with an introduction about JSPs, and then I will explain a simple example where we insert Java code inside JSPs. And then I will explain what are scriptlets and expressions within JSPs. And then in second video, I will explain the 3 other sections. If you remember, if we go back to what we have explained before in the context of the entire architecture, so we have the front end, we have the 2 server sides, and then we have database. All right. So far we have studied the different technologies on the front end, but also we have studied the servlets, which are server-side components that execute some algorithms and then bring back the answer to the client using both HTTP request and HTTP response. If you remember, we have used servlets that create the HTML content that is encapsulated within the HTTP response and sent back to the client. Now, if we think about this situation, actually, we could very simply divide our servlets in 2 parts. The first part that will contain the logic of receiving and extracting information from the HTTP request, and then the second part will be or is the creation of the HTML content that will be sent back to the client through the HTTP response. We have put so far the 2 parts within the servlets, but it would be nice if we can split in 2 distinct parts. The first one will be really the servlet, so the server elements, and then the other part is the HTML. This could be very easily done if we can forward the execution of the program from a servlet to an HTML. This is very easy. However, if you remember, if I take the example of this HTML file, HTML page, if I suppose that the HTML page contains a list of items that are stored in a product data table. So this is, for example, my table. But of course, if I suppose that my content resides in a database, this could be today the content, but later on, or another date, the content would be updated, containing more elements. And then in this case, the elements or the content of the web page is not static, but dynamic. That's the problem, because HTML is supposed to be static. And all what I have studied so far in terms of the front end, we have considered HTML content as static. Now, we would like to find a component that looks like HTML, but that will allow to include dynamic content. This is actually the role of what we call Java server pages. So they look like these Java server pages. Their aim or their objective is to take the content from the servlet, do some dynamic in addition to the HTML content, and everything is sent back to the client. So JSPs are components that look like HTML. They are most of the time considered as fixed template data, but we would like them sometimes to contain small amounts of content. Okay, so we would like this content to be generated dynamically, not depending on a static content, but depending on some dynamic content, such as, for example, the content of a database. And of course, in the context of Java Enterprise Edition, this dynamicity would be done with the inclusion of some Java code. Okay, so we have seen as I said before, the servlets actually should not produce content to be sent back, but they should only deal with the HTTP request, extract the different parameters, do some algorithms, etc. So we would like then these servlets to invoke or to call the JSPs. So actually the JSP should be executed as part of the web server. Why? Because if we consider that the JSP is sent back to the front end, this will not be possible because the front end does not understand Java coding, while Java code resides on the web server. So JSPs should be pages that reside, first of all, on this server to allow them to execute this coding and then to send it to the front end. So it is necessary then to execute the JSPs as part of web server, okay? It is necessary that the JSPs are part of the web server. So how this is done? We have the web container, right, in which we have the servlet container, but when it is the case of a JSP, what happens? The JSP file is translated automatically and fully to Java code. So the part of the JSP that contains Java code remains the same, while all the other content containing HTML is translated into Java. So everything is translated into Java because I have the server that will be able to execute these parts. And then this Java is compiled, and then the Java code becomes a .class code to be executed. And then the whole JSP becomes then a servlet, which follows then the regular life cycle of a servlet, meaning that we start with the init, then we go to the service, and optionally we would have the destroy. So at the very first call of the JSP, the first request, what is done? This phase is done, translation and then compiling. But for other requests, no necessity to recompile again. We can directly call the servlet that actually represents the JSP. Okay. So this is the introduction and an overview. Briefly speaking, a JSP looks like a standard HTML, but that should include Java code. Of course, the task of this translation and compilation, as programmers, we don't have to do it. Java Enterprise Edition does the job for us. What we have to do is only to write JSP as HTML code and then exactly know how to include the Java code. So this is a simple JSP file. As you can see, it is a normal HTML file. So we have the header, we have the meta information, title, so on and so forth. But as you can see later on, I will explain this meta information later on. As you can see in this content here, this is simply, the table is used only for displaying information as a table, as a table template. But then what do I have? I have, as you can see here, this is not normal to have an H, this is not a tag. This is not a normal HTML tag, okay? This is, as you can see, a call to a Java statement, java.utilities.date, which is the call of the constructor of the date method, the date class within Java. We can do exactly the same statement within a Java code. But as you can see, we insert this special tag to inform GSP that I'm going to start a Java code, okay? And then this explanation is important when we create the date object, that it is converted automatically to a string because we suppose that everything would be converted to a string and to allow the browser to understand it, because the browser does not understand Java coding. It understands only HTML and JavaScript. Okay, so you can see the execution of this example. This is a simple GSP example. You can see here that my table contains the date, but you can see here that it is 50 and then I have 51, which means the content is completely dynamic. This is done because, as I explained it before, this page is refreshed every 60 seconds, every minute. That's why I have a dynamic content. The content is not static, but dynamic according or thanks to the execution of my Java utilities date constructor. Okay. Of course, there is an automatic conversion of the GSP expression to a string, and the meta element refreshes the web page every 60 seconds. And I explained before that I have a delay at the beginning because the container translates the GSP to a servlet, and then it compiles and then start the execution. Of course, you would see at the very first execution, it takes some time because we have the translation and the compilation. But then for the execution, it is normally done because I don't have the same process every time. Okay, so you have seen that to include Java code, we need to insert these very special symbols. What are they? They are called actually scriptlets. It means they are scripting elements. So we insert some scripts inside our HTML code, and this is why we call them scripting elements, and the acronym then is called scriptlets. So these scriptlets enable programmers to insert Java code inside GSPs. Okay, so they are delimited by this symbol. This is the starting symbol and this is the ending symbol. You can also insert comments as we do it in HTML or as in Java. So we have specific delimiters for the comments. We have the expression. This is the one we used for calculating the date, right? And you can even declare a variable inside your program. So here is an example in which we are going to use this syntax to have an expression, and we are going to use also special scriptlets and declaration. So here is my first GSP or second GSP, in which I have an annotation which specifies that I'm going to insert a code of type Java language. And then you can see that at the header of my page, I am declaring a new variable named user counter, which is assigned the value of 0. And as you can see, I am specifying this specific symbol at the beginning to specify that this is a declaration of this private integer variable. And then you can see that here we are using this or exploiting this variable. So we are seeing here that you are the client number, and then you see the insertion of this expression, and you can see this is a Java expression ++ user counter, which means that the counter is incremented at every call. I'm going to show you the demo of this one. So here is my example. I have this web page. Notice something very interesting. Now, when we have an HTML file, this is a project in which I have only one HTML file. If I ask NetBeans to view my HTML file, it views. It is possible to view the content of this HTML. However, if I ask NetBeans to view this JSP file, it is not possible because a JSP necessitates to have it is run on the server, and it should be run inside the server with the translation, with the compilation, so on and so forth. So to prepare all the stuff for you, what I have done here, I have already started my Glassfish, but I have so far no application deployed. So of course, when you are using GSPs, for the moment I have no servlet. So this is my GSP. Okay, and then you would see that I need to run it. Okay, and you will see at the very first call, it will take some times. My computer is a little bit taking time. Here it is. Okay, so this is the execution of my GSP. You have seen that it takes time, while if I refresh, so you can see that it behaves very quickly because the JSP is already in the server. Okay, so with this, I have finished the first part of the video where I explained the difference between JSP and HTML and how the JSP are considered within the entire architecture. And we have seen that JSP is the insertion of Java code, and these insertions is done thanks to a very specific elements that are called scriptlets, declarations, and even expressions. See you in the next video.